I had a great conversation with the always amazing Joyce Vance, whose Substack is Civil Discourse. And we discussed the importance of what's going on with the $1.776 billion slush fund, how it relates to Blanche's role as acting attorney general, and the continued cravenness of the Republicans who, unbelievably, voted to get Blanche's nomination out of the Judiciary Committee to have that confirmation vote go in front of the full Senate. And sadly, it looks like this guy is going to get in. So let's take a look at what Joyce Vance had to say.
And the one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you have not been letting go of this whole $1.776 billion slush fund. And I think part of the problem with this era in which we're living is that there is so much going on. There's so much corruption. There's so much incompetence. There's so much cruelty, on and on and on. That it does feel overwhelming, and I know it's hard for people to stay plugged in. However, every once in a while, there are some issues that kind of crystallize in a way, what's wrong, what's going wrong, what's being done to us. And I think in a slightly different way, the reflecting pool is one of those issues.
Yes.
But so too is this horrific slush fund that involves self-dealing, grift, um, the the last nail in DOJ independence, and of course the Attorney General. Well, in this case, acting Attorney General of the United States, acting as the president's defense lawyer, and of course the president's willingness to use his position and his agencies to enrich himself and his family and have total impunity getting away with his crimes, his and his family's financial crimes. So there's a lot there, but again, I think it's a great way to focus on one issue that explains so much of what's wrong. So if you could walk us through, especially since today, Todd Blanche's nomination, unbelievably enough, or believably enough, I guess, made it out of the Judiciary Committee. It will go for the full vote. So I want to get your sense of where we are, how we got here, and um, just what this says about the capitulation and the I don't know, the treasonous behavior of the Republicans in the Senate.
So fabulous. By the end of this, we'll all be on the ground in tears. That's pretty much where this is headed. Look, what I try to do in civil discourse is I try to track the through lines because I have the same concern that you do. There's so much, it's happening all at once, it's overwhelming. I, believe that that's intentional, that that's an effort to get us to unplug, right? How many people have you heard say, oh, I just can't take it anymore. So my whole goal is to track through lines so we can avoid being overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
And this is the mother of the through lines if you're a former federal prosecutor like I am, because this is the corruption of the Justice Department. This is something, I remember I was a U.S. attorney when Eric Holder got in trouble for jokingly saying that he was Obama's wing. He didn't mean the literal. I think what he meant, if anything, was he sort of had his six when they were playing basketball. Um, and he got lambasted. There were calls for his resignation. Now we've got someone who is just the president's wingman. He's his criminal defense.
What is equally troubling is how many, and this I think is something we need to remember in the context of this entire regime. There are so many people lining up to help. There are so many people who know better, who are looking the other way, or worse, enabling all of it. And even people who, by rights, one, owe Donald no allegiance, looking at you, Tom Tillis and John Cornyn, and two, have had their political careers destroyed by the guy they continue to cover for, looking at you, Tom Tillis and John Cornyn. So I think it's the shamelessness, that the openness of it. And, if you could talk a little bit about the judge's ruling and how utterly obvious it is that we are looking at a situation in which the person who controls both entities is claiming that,
Yeah.
he has been harmed. And you said this in a post, you repeated in a recent post, but echoing in one of your earlier posts, I think back in May, there's corruption. And then there is the second Trump administration.
That was my instinctive reaction to this whole situation. This struck me as being over the top bad, really from the minute we saw that settlement agreement, purported agreement, signed by Todd Blanche. And
Yeah.
let's just do the legal rewind here. Here we are, we're in Florida. Trump files a lawsuit in the Southern District. That lawsuit is against the IRS. And for starters, he files after the statute of limitations has run. It is a lawsuit that should be immediately dismissed. But does the IRS dismiss? No, they don't. They never get there. Instead, Donald Trump dismisses his case, which he's entitled to do because the defendant, the IRS, has not yet filed their answer. But the quirk is, the unacceptable wrinkle is that we get both the slush fund, the 1776 fund. People keep calling that the $1.8 billion fund, but let's call it what it is. It's the 1776 fund, the battle cry of the January 6 rioters. And then the following day, we get this crazy piece of paper with Todd Blanche's signature saying Donald Trump, his family, his businesses cannot be investigated, which means that they cannot be prosecuted and cannot be forced to pay back taxes. The agreement is actually a little bit broader than that. It's being construed as being limited to those IRS situations. But that's what Donald Trump gets for filing this bogus lawsuit. And that's what sets off this whole brouhaha. But Mary, for our purposes, and then I'll stop so you can come off of mute. For our purposes, the important thing here is the focus on Todd Blanche, who Donald Trump has nominated to be his attorney general. Todd Blanche is in the role of the president's lawyer. And that, folks, is not the attorney general of the United States job. The attorney general is the people's lawyer, not the president's. Todd Blanche, who folks in the Southern District of New York used to love, thought was a good guy, Todd Blanche lost his way at some point. What is it that they say, Mayor? Everything Trump touches dies or something like that?
Yeah. Although I would say every person who chooses to be in Donald's orbit destroys themselves.
Yeah.
It's not involuntary. People sign up for this shit. And I think, to me, Todd Blanche is the Heinrich Himmler of the Trump regime. This sort of seemingly mild-mannered guy who just got a taste of power and got addicted to it and is willing to do the most despicable things, knowing what his role should be and what he's chosen to do instead. So just to remind people, this slush fund, as Joyce correctly points out, it is the $1.776 billion slush fund. And Todd Blanche, actually, this whole thing started with Todd Blanche saying, "Oh, that's just the number that we came," because they had to assess the damages, and so it's just coincidental that it happens to be
Pulled it out of the hat.
pulled it out of it. So from the very beginning, this is obviously corrupt. And again, to remind people, this is to compensate traitors to this country. This is to compensate people who on January 6th, 2021, at Donald's behest, attacked our Capitol, endangered the lives of everybody in that building, and in some cases committed sedition. And that's what this is for. And just to make it even worse, we're adding the grift. This if this hadn't been done, Donald already owes the IRS $100 million. So that's getting wiped clean. Don't we all wish that our tax debt could be wiped clean, right? So there's so much, again, this is why I think this is a very good way to define what's wrong with this. Plus, of course, Republican complicity. So I think that's what I want to turn to now.
A quick note. The easiest way to support what we do is to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss anything. Thanks for watching.
We have a situation in which Republicans know how wrong this is. And yet we have, I think it was John Cornyn who said, there's nothing we could do to rein this president in. Nothing we can do.
United States Senate.
But I think more importantly than that, they're pretending that Blanche's nomination, or I should say confirmation, rests on this one issue when he has time and time again proven himself to be so breathtakingly corrupt that even without this issue, he shouldn't be confirmed.
Blanche is in the mix when the Justice Department ignores a federal judge's order to turn the planes around in the early deportation cases. Blanche is running the show when victims' photographs and identifying information is released when the Epstein files are made public, and at the same time continues to protect some of the perpetrators. Todd Blanche's fingerprints are all over Minneapolis. The Attorney General has a lot of power. He could hold ICE agents accountable for executing American citizens on American streets. He hasn't lifted a finger. And lest you think Todd Blanche maybe has some redeeming qualities, he sat by and was complicit in the firing of people that he had worked with, close friends. We watched one, U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York leave. We watched a lot of folks that he knew personally take it on the chin because they were doing their jobs and following the rule of law. And for Todd Blanche, that wasn't good enough because Todd Blanche believes in the rule of Trump, the unitary executive, the all-powerful presidency. I just don't have enough adjectives, I don't think, to describe how bad this is. So let me just say it flat out. This is the end of the Justice Department. There will still be good federal prosecutors all across the country doing their best to do their jobs, but Todd Blanche as the leader will so cripple public confidence in the institution that it will take years for us to recover. I'm confident that we will, by the way. Let me say, prepared to get to work on day one. But nonetheless, it is damaging to one of the most foundational institutions our democracy rests on.
And, I cannot imagine how devastating this is for you, having been a U.S. attorney. And as you know, my wife, Rhonda, was in the disability rights section of the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ, which Harmeet Dillon is doing her utmost to destroy. So I share your optimism. I do believe that the DOJ will be back, but I think part of that project is dependent upon our ability to make sure the American people know what's happening and who's responsible. Americans have a notoriously short memory. And this is going to be, well, you would know better than I, but I'm guessing that this is going to take a very, very long time to unwind, reimagine, rebuild, etc. So I just want to get your take on what the Republicans are thinking. I mean, it's so cynical, but also like, why? Why are they going along with this? It's just, especially people like Tillis and Cornyn who are out the door. And it feels like they're doing what they always do. Susan Collins is in trouble potentially in Maine in her reelection,
Yes.
and she's voting no to give herself cover, which to me is a tell. It tells us they know how corrupt and despicable this is.
So I have a very cynical view of what's happening in the Senate. I think that these are all folks that are putting their personal future ahead of the country. Susan Collins would not have been given permission to vote against Todd Blanche if they weren't confident that they had the votes that they needed. I think with Mitch McConnell out, they can afford to lose 2, but not 3, unless John Fetterman crosses over and votes for Blanche. So, that's how close the vote is going to be. As for the weeble wobbles on the Judiciary Committee, Cornyn and Tillis from North Carolina, as you say, neither one is coming back to the Senate. They could have had a moment where they stood up and did something courageous. Instead, I think what they're doing is they're bargaining for a future in which they can be lobbyists. They will have access to senators in a way that few lobbyists who have not been in the Senate do. And they want to make sure, who knows? Did they extract promises? We don't know. We don't have any way of knowing exactly what kind of deal was cut. But when John Cornyn goes from saying that he needs a written retreat from the slush fund and from the immunity deal. And then Todd Blanche just writes something on a piece of paper at 11:09 p.m. on a Sunday and puts it on Twitter. And Cornyn says, well, that's good enough for me. That's not honesty. And John Cornyn is a lawyer. He's well educated. He understands what's important here. He's simply, it appears, I think to me, that he's putting self ahead of country.
And that seems to be the mantra of every single elected Republican these days. And it's an indictment of this party. It's an indictment of their betrayal of their constituents. Their job is to uphold the Constitution. And again, Cornyn literally said, I don't understand what my job is. I don't understand what my constitutional powers is, because what can we possibly do? Well, you know what? You're a co-equal branch of government and you're supposed to provide a check and balance. That's what, idiot. So, that's the problem. They're not idiots. They've actually read the Constitution, unlike the guy that they're deferring to. So, I wanted to also just ask a little bit about the calculation, because Blanche has proven himself to be utterly untrustworthy. This is a guy who's willing to make a deal to help out Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, a rapist and sex trafficker of young women, right? The guy has no bottom. And yet, the people who will have a say in making him Attorney General of the United States of America are overlooking all of that. So I guess, to ask why, I think we know why, but clearly Blanche does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. Republicans don't care. And I think the situation, because I agree with you, it's about, hey, I want to be a Fox host. I want to be on the board of a Fortune 500 company. I want to be a lobbyist. It just is another way in which Republicans, the Trump regime, are exposing the weaknesses in our system and providing us a roadmap. And please, let's not call it Project 2028. Let's use our own language. Let's use our own framing. I'm so tired of, co-opting Republican language. We'll figure out what to call it, but there have to be rules. If you want to be a rep, a senator, somebody at the DOJ, you should want to be doing that because you want to be a civil servant, and you should know what that means. So it feels like given the corruption of the system and the ways in which this administration in particular has found the weaknesses in the system, we need to say, okay, being a senator is like an extraordinary honor. It gives you enormous amounts of power to shape this country and to help people's lives if that's what you're interested in. So, therefore, when you resign or when you get voted out of office, you have to wait 5 years before you can, right?
Such a fan of that for U.S. attorneys, for senators. If you're going to be a public servant, be a public servant. Look, we all have to make a living. We've all got to put food on the table, right? But if you're a United States senator, you have a whole lot of options. You don't have to become a lobbyist. That's certainly lucrative. And a lot of people go to the Senate with modest, financial means and leave the Senate however many years later extremely wealthy. I recall seeing the numbers for Jeff Sessions when he left the Senate to become Donald Trump's first attorney general. And it was crazy. These people do make money, right? But with public responsibility comes, I think, the need to be ethical and honest and open. And maybe we want people who are less concerned about trading on the office they held to enhance their financial status and more interested in serving.
Yeah, the last thing we want is people getting into higher office to get rich. I mean, that just doesn't, that is not the way to go here. So, Joyce, again, everybody, you must subscribe to Civil Discourse. It is, sorry, my God.
Civil
Civil
Discourse. You helped me name it.
I did. Um, although I almost helped you misname it because I was feeling very cynical at the time. So
I had
I said,
forgotten that. That's
said
right.
uncivil. No. Because you're Joyce Vance and you take the high road in a way I sometimes find myself not able to do.
I may have to write a column like one night a week called Uncivil Discourse. That's actually a great idea. Maybe I'll go back to that.
Well, I think once in a while it's important to point out how uncivil the discourse is, even as we want to change things. But one of the many reasons people, and the adjective I was looking for was unredoubtable, Joyce Vance, is because you lay things out, these complex legal issues so clearly that we lay people can really understand what's going on, what's at stake, why it matters, right? And you also have a unique way of making people feel like, as bad as things are, there is hope, there is optimism, and you actually still have faith. And I mean, I do too, but I think it's harder for me sometimes to hang on to that and to convey it. So because it's getting late, so I want to let you go. But before we do, what do you want to tell people about this kind of critical moment in United States history about what can happen if, because I do think that this is dependent upon Democrats, like pro-democracy people getting back into power. What can happen and why should we stay invested in the future of this country?
I mean, look, John Cornyn is wrong. There is a lot that the Senate can do. And if Democrats return majorities in both houses following the midterms, they can begin holding the president accountable. Congress has the power of the purse. It has not used that. That is a significant power. They can literally pass legislation. You know, they did this with ICE, by the way, which is why members of Congress can go in and inspect facilities. So they can draft clever rules. They can indict or censure Pete Hegseth, Todd Blanche, all of these folks, and hold them accountable. And this stuff matters. Mary, let me just, I know we're late. Let me just tell a fast story. this is something that restored hope for me this week. And I need to have things like this happen periodically because it reminds me that we're not alone and that there are so many people out there across the country that you never hear about who are doing stuff. So I am literally eating lunch by myself, sitting at a restaurant, and it's sort of crowded. It's jam-packed, and a really nice couple sits down next to me. And I start talking with the wife. Um, and it turns out she's one of these remarkable women, right? She's out there for progressive causes. She tells me that she canvassed for Kamala Harris, but more importantly, she's been out canvassing in this Senate race up in Maine. And she was confident that Troy Jackson would beat Susan Collins. You know, Susan Collins has been around for a long time, and she has had remarkable staying power in races that one would think she could not win. But if you listen to Mainers, because I think nobody understands a Maine Senate race like people who've lived here and are from here, um, there's a new mood, and they've had enough of Susan Collins. You know, last night in the elections in the heartland of America, in Kansas and in Missouri, we saw citizens in red states push back against these measures that were designed to make democracy less democratic, right? I mean, 61%, I think, in Kansas, and the numbers in Missouri were even higher. This is Americans rallying around the flag, the real flag, not the upside flag that Ms. Alito hangs. People care. People are awake. People are ready to rock and roll. So go out, get registered, make sure you stay registered, and get ready to throw a party on Election Day and take your neighbors along with you.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it is really important for people to understand that states are very different. They have extraordinarily different cultures and needs and what have you, and ideas about what their ideal candidate is. So we need to trust people in those states, whether it's Michigan or Maine or Wisconsin or Texas, that they know what they want, they know what they need, and they know what's going to work. And I think it is so important right now to stay hopeful because times are tough and it's ridiculous to pretend otherwise. But we've got people like Joyce Vance in the trenches who is helping us understand what's going on, what we can do about it. And I mean, personally, Joyce, you help me get through this stuff every day because tough times ahead. But being able to have people like you to look to find hope and power is incredibly important. So again, everybody, check out Joyce's Substack. You can also check out mine. It's called The Good in Us. And we're going to keep doing this because last I heard, this is going to be the most important election of our lifetime.
It is. You know, Mary, you're my favorite Trump. I'm sure everybody here could have figured that out even if I hadn't said it. But I, too, remember when you named your Substack. And you were like, I remember the way your face lit up when you said that you were going to choose The Good in Us as the name. And it's what I love about you the most. Even when times are tough, even when you're feeling down, you have an ability to dig deep and find the good. And the good right now is this shared faith that we can pull this off, that even though, you know, after 4 years of Joe Biden, the country took a sharp right turn back towards hell, that we can get back up on our feet again and pull this off. And I am confident. Let's go.
I am completely with you. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. And of course, Joyce and I will be back with more. Have a wonderful night. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Please take a second to like and share the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Mary Trump Media channel. Thanks for watching.